Hello. This lecture is going to be about an academic overview of morality. So, what is morality? Morality has long been a subject of deep inquiry across multiple academic disciplines, from philosophy and psychology to anthropology, sociology, and neuroscience. Each field offers unique perspectives on how moral values developed, how individuals make ethical decisions, and how morality shapes human society. This article provides an overview of the academic study of morality, covering its historical roots, major theories, and interdisciplinary approaches. So let's take a look at some of the historical and philosophical foundations. The study of morality has its origins in ancient philosophy, where thinkers such as Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle debated the nature of virtue, justice, and the good life. Aristotle, in particular, introduced the idea of virtue ethics, emphasizing character and moral habits. During the Enlightenment, moral philosophy took on new directions with figures like Kant, advocating for deontological ethics, which argues that moral actions should follow universal principles, regardless of the consequence. In contrast, John Stuart Mill promoted utilitarianism, which evaluates moral decisions based on the greatest good for the greatest number. In the 20th century, metaethics emerged as a field analyzing the nature of moral language and the objectivity of moral claims. So philosophers continue to debate whether moral truths are absolute or relative to the situation, laying a foundation for a strong discourse in contemporary ethical issues. So let's look at a little more, let's look at the ancient Greek philosophy. So we'll start with Socrates. He emphasized moral introspection, arguing that ethical knowledge is essential for virtuous living. If you're going to live a good life, you have to know about ethics, first off. His famous dictum was, "The unexamined life is not worth living," reflects his belief that morality requires critical self-reflection at all times. Why am I doing it? What is pushing me to do it? What is internal that's moving me in this direction? Plato, in his dialogues such as the Republic, explored the concept of justice and the role of morality in an ideal culture, an ideal society. He argued that a just society is one where individuals fulfill their natural roles in harmony. So in other words, that you're born, with a need to be just, and that you will fulfill those roles as you go through the society. Aristotle also introduced the concept of virtue ethics, which emphasized character development and moral habits. So you have to continue to do things on the basis of morality, and you develop habits within them. He proposed that moral virtues such as courage, temperance, and honesty are cultivated through practice and lead to human flourishing. And that would be the goal. So if we move into the Enlightenment and we look at some of the philosophers there, moral philosophy shifted towards rationalism and universal principles. So those figures included Immanuel Kant, 1724 to 1804, developed deontological ethics, arguing that moral actions should follow categorical imperatives, universal laws, so to speak, and that they all apply regardless of whatever consequence you might face. So for Kant, morality was based on duty and reason and respect for human dignity. You told the truth no matter what it got you into, no matter how bad it was. You still told the truth. David Hume, 1771 to 1776, was in contrast with Kant. He proposed that moral judgment stem from emotions rather than reason. Hume's empiricism laid the groundwork for later psychological theories on morality. John Stuart Mill developed utilitarianism, which evaluates actions based on their consequences and seeks to maximize overall happiness. So his principle for the greatest good for the greatest number remains influential in ethics and policymaking. So sometimes it's not good to send soldiers to die, but if it saves the whole culture, then it's good, right? So there's this idea of, what is the greatest good? When we get into the 20th century, moral philosophy became increasingly concerned with what we call metaethics, the study of the nature, meaning, and objectivity of moral claims. So some major developments here include moral relativism versus moral realism. Philosophers debated whether moral truths are objective, moral realism, or culturally dependent, moral relativism. So are they relative to the culture, relative to the experience, the time that you're in, or are they objective? No matter what happens, this is what we have to do. In the is-ought problem, G.E. Moore and Hume questioned whether moral conclusions can be derived from factual statements, influencing modern discussions on moral reasoning. So, do we get the facts first and then figure out what the moral thing to do will be? How do we create the discussion, and where do we reason? Where do we get our reason from? Or is it something that's more absolute? There is no reasoning. It is what it is. So emotivism and prescriptivism by A.J. Ayer and R.M. Hare argue that moral language primarily expresses emotions or prescriptions rather than objective truths. So you can see how they all moved away from this idea of moral realism. When we look at the psychological approaches of morality, we're examining how individuals develop a sense of right and wrong. So psychologists study morality by examining how moral values develop, how people make their decisions, and if they're ethical, and what psychological factors influence those moral decisions. So let's take a look at some of the influential theories here. The first person we're going to look at is Jean Piaget. He developed the moral development theory. He was a Swiss psychologist and was one of the first to study how children develop moral reasoning. He proposed that children progress from a heteronomous morality, where rules are absolute and imposed by authority, that would be about the ages of 4 to 7, to an autonomous morality, where individuals recognize that rules are flexible and based on mutual agreements. So that he looked at it more from a stage development theory. Lawrence Kohlberg's stages of moral development extend Piaget's work, and he outlined 6 stages of moral reasoning, ranging from obedience to avoid punishment, right? Pre-conventional morality, to principles of justice and universal ethical standards, post-conventional morality. And then we have Carol Gilligan, her Ethics of Care. Gilligan challenged Kohlberg's male-centered model by proposing that women often approach morality through an ethics of care, emphasizing relationships and responsibility over rigid justice-based reasoning. She criticized Kohlberg for being, that it was a kind of a winner-take-all theory of abstract justice, and where women tend to think about emphasizing relationships and empathy. More recently, Jonathan Haidt of the social institutionist model suggests that moral judgments are primarily driven by intuition rather than conscious reasoning, that you have a gut feeling, you feel sick if it's wrong, it bothers you think about it, it doesn't go away. Individuals justify their moral stances after forming them instinctively. So in other words, it's after the fact. Let's take a look at sociological and anthropological approaches. So sociologists and anthropologists have been studying morality by examining how cultural norms, how religious beliefs, and how social structures shape the ethical behavior of a person or a society. And some of those influential theories are here. We see Emile Durkheim. He argued that morality arises from social cohesion, with shared values binding societies together. He saw moral rules as essential for maintaining some sort of order in the culture. Max Weber explored the role of religion in shaping moral worldviews, particularly in his work on Protestant ethics and capitalism. And Clifford Geertz, on cultural relativism, emphasized that moral values vary across a culture and are deeply embedded in historical and social context. So this view challenges the idea of universal moral principles. In contemporary psychology, or sociology rather, researchers investigate how morality is shaped by factors such as the person's economic condition, the media influence, and the political ideology, offering insight into moral divides in modern societies. So, for example, it's wrong to steal. But if you have no money coming in and you have a hungry child and you're homeless, are you going to steal that loaf of bread? And are you wrong? Because you're trying to save your child's life. So these are questions about the idea, is stealing universally wrong, or is there a relative reason culturally where we might need to rethink that? What's the real moral thing to do? This is one of the reasons why when we look at things like the Constitution or we look at laws, that many of them are written in a way that is supposed to be a living spirit, that they can experience the relativism of what is happening in the day, in the time frame, and that they're not hard and fast, they're not absolute. So neuroscience and biological basis for morality is another way to look at how we understand what's right and wrong. With advancements in brain imaging and cognitive science, researchers have begun to explore the neural mechanisms behind moral decision-making. Let's take a look at some of those theories. So one of the first areas that we are looking at are the regions of the brain. So neuroscientists have identified regions of the brain such as the prefrontal cortex and the amygdala as critical to moral reasoning and emotional responses to ethical dilemmas. The prefrontal cortex is responsible for rational moral reasoning. The amygdala processes emotions involved in moral judgment. The trolley problem studies show how different brain regions engage in utilitarian versus deontological thinking. Experiments using the trolley problem, a thought experiment in which individuals choose between sacrificing one person to save others, have revealed how different parts of the brain are involved in utilitarian versus deontological moral reasoning. In evolutionary psychology, the morality has adaptive functions. Behaviors such as reciprocal altruism and cooperation are seen as evolutionary traits that helped early human societies survive. So it's not an end-sum game. In other words, I am the only one who's going to win. If I do this with more people and I negotiate and I have more people with me, then I may have a better outcome, right? So there's a reciprocal type of altruism. Reciprocal altruism is proposed by Robert Trivers, explains morality as evolving to ensure that there's cooperation in the culture. So Frans de Waal did a lot of primate research, and in his studies, he demonstrates that empathy and fairness in chimpanzees suggested that morality has deep evolutionary roots. He concluded that moral-like behaviors in primates suggest that the roots of morality may extend beyond humans and that it happens in other species. So in contemporary issues, we have to look at some other areas like artificial intelligence and the ethics of that. So as AI systems take on ethical decision-making roles, for example, self-driving cars, it's not just about driving the car, it's also about not killing other people, right? Or saving the lives of the people inside the car. Researchers explore how to encode moral reasoning into these machines. And that is huge. It's a huge contemporary issue that's happening as we speak. Political and social divides. Moral psychology explains why ideological groups often view each other as morally wrong rather than just different. And so there's this idea, there's kind of what we like to call the tribe mentality. And so like if you're a big Packer fan, no matter if they win or lose, they're your team. No matter if they're right or wrong, they're your team. And so there's this kind of a ideological group mentality that changes the way we understand people. And our idea of reciprocal altruism goes out the window, right? Because we can't work with others. We can't negotiate. We can't look for the good of all. We only can look for our team. That's it. So that ideological group really stands in a way sometimes from looking at things from a moral standpoint, because no matter what, if they don't agree with you, they are morally wrong. And global ethics and environmental morality is another contemporary issue as climate change and global crisis are beginning to emerge. And we're seeing it more and more and more with the fires and all the things that are going on in the culture. Interdisciplinary research focuses on how to create a universal moral framework for collective action from all of us. It's not just about driving the big car, the big truck, or using up all the gas that continues to affect our environment. Cutting down more trees, cutting down what can we do collectively that's for the good of all of us? How can we figure that out? So in conclusion, here's some takeaways. So morality is multidisciplinary: philosophy, psychology, sociology, neuroscience. Morality is both innate and learned behavior. So it's part of our DNA, it's God-given, and it's also things we learned. Biological roots, but shaped by culture and reasoning. Future challenges in morality, we've got AI, political divides, environmental ethics. And for a final thought, how should we apply these insights to the real world and moral dilemmas? This is a good question for you to ask yourself. The study of morality is rich and it's evolving. And it is a field that spans philosophy, psychology, sociology, anthropology, neuroscience, and artificial intelligence. As new technologies and global challenges reshape ethical concerns, the interdisciplinary exploration of morality will continue to provide us with valuable insights into our nature, into human nature, into social justice, and to ethical decision-making in an ever-increasing complex world. So I hope that helps you out with understanding your chapter, and I hope that it gives you a good sense of sort of introspective thinking about, what is really morality. Until next time.